syllabary up there was sequoias.
There's no evidence Sequoia's writing there, but one of the authors in the cave is his son.
Okay, okay, all right. And of course, the location of it
Yeah.
is also so fascinating. Yeah, I want to go to the cave.
No, so I will say, like, one of my thoughts was one of kind of ethics and the realities of, like, here I am in this cave, but what right do I have to be in this, that other people have had access to these caves, but, like, I think about our elders, right, who really could help inform us in some ways that, like, I can't do that, that there's all sorts of people that need to be in those caves because they can actually think about them in ways that I cannot. But physically, they're inaccessible, right, for a subset of people. And also that there's a way in which, like, what right do I have to be there as opposed to all Cherokee people? Or do I have a right, should I be there? There's also a component of, like, is it appropriate for me to be here? I've had to think through a lot of, just culturally appropriate practices for going in and out of those caves. And added to that, we've had to think a lot about what do you share with people? Because the kind of complications of these sites is, on the one hand, you want them protected. On the one hand, we want to know more about them. But the more we know about them, the more other people are drawn to them, and potentially, I will tell you, the reason we went into the cave that I showed you is because the cave had just changed hands. It was in private hands and had just been sold. And there was a caving group that wanted to continue to have access to the cave. And so they came to the new cave owner and they said, we want to come in and we'll volunteer to clean up all that historic graffiti. Thankfully, that's the point at which Tennessee was asked to step in, and at that point it was like, whoa, hold up, because if they had gone in and done the good thing of cleaning up the graffiti, we would have lost that syllabary. And so, that on the we want both good stewards of these properties, right? We want good relationships with folks, but also the more people who go there, the more potential there is for harm, right? So how do we counterbalance that, right? The kind of desire to think about these sites, to engage with them, and on the other hand, to not do harm, right? To not perpetuate any long-term harm to these sites more broadly. And then additionally, the kind of profound reality is, I've thought about this a lot, that I think even for our readers and speakers of Cherokee language today, there's been this compelling thought that, like, is there something about this three-dimensional space that has to be read different? Like, on the one hand, I said there's all these different authors and they're all doing different things, but what if they're doing something together? I mean, that's kind of, really, like, I don't have an answer to that, but, like, what if we're just so stupid and our forebears were just so much smarter than us that they're doing something so complicated that we will never be able to read what's in that cave collectively, right? And I just had to get comfortable with that I'm never going to fully understand what's going on in that space, that there are limitations to what we can know. And so it's just you have to live in that space of wonder, which is why I've never left those caves. Yeah.
Oh, I'm curious, so you, the oral language and skills are taught in a very kind of organic way, you said, just as the village was set up. Did you see a clear difference when syllabary was introduced, how learning changed? Because that's something you do have to kind of broadly memorize.
So, I mean, I explicitly tried to focus on the areas around here, but obviously I carry this book out to Indian Territory and Oklahoma. And one of the one of the things that happened when the syllabary gets introduced is that the missions are already going. The missions start in 1800 with the Moravians at the Van Plantation. There's other missions being set up. I mean, the Methodists are starting day schools by the early 1820s. So there's a lot of competition at that point. I mean, most kids are still not getting education, formal education through mission schools at that point. But one of the things that does happen is the moment that Sequoyah introduces the syllabary, the attendance at schools immediately drops. Because Cherokee people are like, well, the reason we're sending our kids to these schools is because we want them to get literacy. And now we have literacy. And we don't need the English language because we have the Cherokee language, right? And so there's a way, I think there's some interesting things that happen. The other thing that I had to think about a lot is that one of the ways that we think about Cherokees, again, is kind of, they assimilated, they just wanted, they just did whatever the white folks were doing. And I think we have to grapple with the ways that Cherokee people are thinking about acculturation. And some people want schools and they want their kids to get educated in the English language. Some people are Christianizing, many are not. That actually wasn't the impetus for schools, was not the Christianization. Cherokee people didn't want that. They wanted the literacy. But over time, it raises these, there's an account that is slightly outside of those earliest primary documents, where Sequoyah laments the fact that his syllabary has been used to translate parts of the Bible. The thing about language is we can't control what people do with it, right? But that's true on the flip side, right? Like those missionaries that are coming in teaching Cherokee people English and are trying to convert them, there's no controlling what Cherokee people are like, we're going to launch some Supreme Court cases and use your legal system. And, you can't control how folks are going to use that language. So there can be resistances and embraces of that on both sides. And I spent a lot of time thinking about the ways that that shows up, both in the East and the West. So when Sequoyah goes west, he teaches a bunch of Chickamauga warriors who moved out to the West much earlier. They come to him and they want to learn the language. And there's another Cherokee elder who comes and says, I remember all these speeches, these oral speeches that he's heard from older chiefs that he has memorized, and he wants to be able to write them down for future generations. So even though he's maintained them in an oral mental archive, right, which is older, he wants to use this new technology because he sees the way the language can move forward. And he sees a potential change that, that is fascinating. So there's not a kind of clean and neat, perfect way that all of this is playing out. I mean, that there's no evidence that Ayoka ever went to a formal school. And I use that, like, I have a line in the book where I'm like, by those standards, Ayoka isn't educated, but to suggest that she's uneducated defies the realities of her education. She's incredibly educated, just not in this other definition of what it means to be educated, right? She's educated in a much older way. And so there's no evidence she ever went to a school, but she's certainly educated. And so what do we do, too, when we have to put different kinds of education side by side? I'm kind of skipping ahead to some of the later chapters. There's a lot of, I included a lot of family history in this book, in part because my dad is Cherokee, my mom is a white woman from New York, my dad's a Cherokee guy from rural Oklahoma. And my mom was a public school teacher. My dad enlisted in the military. And my dad didn't do well in school, hated school. My mom loved school. I did great in school. But there was a kind of discomfort on the part of my dad's relationship to schooling was fraught. Added to that, when I think about my family more broadly, that I have some great uncles and great aunts, and there's a slew of them, there were 9 total, And their parents were all bilingual in Cherokee and English. Grandmothers of those folks were monolingual in Cherokee. And 6 of my oldest great aunts and uncles who went to a boarding school continued to speak Cherokee. And the youngest 3 went to Oklahoma public schools and they didn't. And so when we're thinking about kind of the story we're getting around boarding schools and language loss, I had to live with the fact that didn't fit with my own family history. And that doesn't mean that boarding schools didn't contribute to language loss, but I also was like, well, shoot, the public schools have clearly contributed to language loss as well. And I've got to talk about that, right? And what are the ways that like a school that's situated, the boarding school they went to is actually in the same community where Sequoyah built his cabin in 1829 once he's in Indian Territory. So this school's just down the road. It's there before forced removal takes place. And it becomes a kind of community school amongst Cherokee people and answers to Cherokee people. So the idea that this school can be coercive and force Cherokee people not to speak Cherokee in a community where everybody speaks Cherokee and the expectation is that you will speak Cherokee, like that doesn't change, just because boarding schools kind of start to take this different path. They can take that path in Carlisle, Pennsylvania. They can't take that path in Vian, Oklahoma. So, thinking about these larger complications around language and around the continuation of language, which are complicated. So I've thought a lot about syllabary over time and how people use the language over time, but also the ways that syllabary gets implemented and the kind of mess that it creates for people. Beautiful mess, but a mess nonetheless. Yeah. Yeah.
Not exactly sure what my question is, but I'm just curious about song and song in Cherokee.
So, thank you. I promise I didn't. We can work together on this later. So one of the things that I thought about in relationship to the cave is these single syllables, right? And I will tell you in that cave that you saw the image of, there is actually a musical feature inside the cave. So there's a little section that if you climb up inside of it, you can fit your body in there, and somebody hits the outside of that crevasse, it creates this melodious sound inside it for the person standing inside. So the cave itself has some musical qualities that kind of force you to think about music and sound, and I think caves generally, there is a different kind of sound to it, but then when I think about these syllables, right, and I think about going to stomp grounds today, that there are songs that are sung at our stomp grounds that cannot be translated into what we understand today. That probably they were understood, maybe they were understood in an earlier moment, but we don't necessarily have those translations today because language changes over time. And I thought to myself, is this song? Is it music? Is it, I don't know. I mean, again, it's one of those questions that I don't have the answer to, but it did occur to me that perhaps what we're seeing is even music in the cave. And but it makes sense. I mean, it makes sense given some other evidence, and it also makes sense given ceremony, given the role that music and song would have played in ceremony and in these kind of more sacred spaces. I don't know if that hits on where you were thinking, but yeah. Well, I want to thank you all for the conversation that has followed. I appreciate your questions and comments, and I'm delighted to kind of hang around and say more or not. And I know that we're selling books, so if anybody wants a book, that's great. And I'm again just grateful to be here in a place that has just informed my thinking. And I actually have an essay coming out where I'm thinking about Watauga and Nikwashi and its relationship to the American Revolution. It's part of my upcoming book project, but so this area has really has really stimulated my thinking, not only kind of continued thinking from this book, but is continuing to make its way into my future work as well. So I appreciate this community and appreciate you all, so thank you.
That is my daughter's sister. And her sister's not and she was she does that. Set up shoes for so you want to introduce me? Yeah.
So you have this illegal settlement. What property is illegal? All right. So you got Richard Henderson, consummated, private land, American, 20 million acres, basically the state of Kentucky. And it's 4 or 5 separate treaties. So they're settling there. You don't like settlements there that are way past the property rights. Now, there's dispute, how knowing were these people? All right, now you have the overlook Cherokee. You got Rutherford Company, and you're going to decide, Cherokee, Tackleton, they go after the Washington, because Cherokee's Cherokee. It's like Genesis in Iraq in 2003, because Saudi Arabia and Afghanistan. So those go to Iraq.
Well, because, I guess I was asking,
Yeah.
part about the seal out, so we'll see
That's
Sorry, yes.
whatever you want.
Well, I had the same
I
thing,
probably won't.
not nearly as bad, but just kids. And I would, shovel, mulch it with the glue, and I started to throw it, I was like,
We've got a guy named William Short. Okay, he's full on Scott. He's one of 160 Scots licensed to trade with these overlook Cherokees. Out of Charles, way over all this. He marries a Cherokee woman because that's what he's figured to do. He used economic advantage, political advantage, and advantage. All right? They have a little girl. She marries a Scot, last name McDonald. They have a little girl who's Cherokee, but her mom's Cherokee. She's going to marry Scott Cherokee later, last name Thomas. John.
Well, I mean,
John also wanted Cherokee by blood. It's nothing.
It's nothing untoward.
they were,
Is he okay?
you're probably
I get words. And then charges on my credit card. The pharmacist in charge, now he said, oh, I spent so hard. Okay, we're hiking, where it's coming from. I took it over.
Now, that's the identity. Now,
Did he go to the doctors or just? He went to the pharmacy. Well, I still keep in touch with Ann very
one honey, 1776, and beers, and hillbillies with.
all of the terror.
That's what I'm not going
No, it's a lot of.
an interesting
Like
look
today at our
thing
business
would be,
meeting. Because of.
But anyway, I
I
just,
think it is
I
called,
just.
I have a memo for you, Bill Woodhouse, Charleston, on this the day after the meeting.
but tracing everything
Memo
from
that you
the
take on.
No. And they haven't even figured out.
And
Yeah, I would love
Come
that.
by
And he's-
Thursday afternoon, Friday afternoon, maybe you can do,
I recommended like the same boss, and it was like, he
Yes,
just,
we do. And we're going,
because it's on so many different.
Yeah.
I just wanted to support him and see what he's saying. I would have no desire to do what he did, but.
I gotta go.
He would say things.
Well, thank you.
All right, we'll see, I'll see you soon.
Yeah.
No,
You gonna be there Friday?
I think I'm coming Friday, because she wanted to go, and I think I do too.
Yeah, what a good
Oh, we're
question.
gonna, for the school thing.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, we're gonna be there for sure, we'll be there.
I'm still.
For storytelling, yeah.
I wanted to introduce myself. My name's John Bill.
Hi, John. Yeah, we saw that she's still
It's been
there.
a while.
And now I run the little museum here.
Okay.
So,
He's our historian.
I'm a retired, I'm not a scholar, she's a scholar, I'm a social.
Well, I was on this board.
He's a
Retread.
He is. He sells himself short.
Ideas out.
Give me some breathing space.
Your angle on 1776 with Niquosi and Watauga. No, I know, I know you know, I mean, I just happened upon, you know, Blunt, I Henderson I knew, you know, for a while, but William Blunt and his relationship to Robert Love, this is all, I'm working on a concrete here, a series of columns. I'm crazy ambitious, 1,500 to 17, or 18, but I'm doing Cherokee, go down. I'm doing a collision story more than anything, so.
I'm back there, but I guess you'll be back.
What do I need to read?
Well, I mean, lately I've been going back and reading anything connected to, anybody who wrote around
So far,
Rough.
it hasn't happened.
Okay.
There's also a
You
bunch of
know,
accounts, there's an account written
I'm
by
sure we're
the
like
UNC's
minded on
president.
this, but every time I'm involved with something, I grab something and say,
Early 80s,
Yes, for God's protection.
early 19s,
I really do think.
right, kind of reflecting on the
Yeah,
story of
yeah,
Rough, which is
and we
interesting.
Sure
So,
do.
but one of the things that
I
I
think it's
focusing
helped a
on
lot in our
is
country
there's
too.
Good.
People
I
just
focus on,
for-
try to focus on people whenever,
I pray
specific
for
people
all
that
the
we might
countries
not
in the
know,
world that are
that get to know a little better.
You think of all the
There's
people that
a
could have
Presbyterian
been
minister that's
Mm.
in these
We've
campaigns,
been very impressed.
and he
Anyway,
accidentally killed.
I love coming to the lecture series.
Yeah, this is good.
Accidentally killed. That he thinks is an Indian. So he meant to kill an Indian.
Right, they're still there.
But he accidentally killed a black person.
Wow, those are cool shoes.
But then he later winds up giving a sermon on the Mound
Okay.
at Niquosi
And in 1776?
to the troops. And he's going on and on about, thank goodness they renamed this town Franklin.
In 1776?
I've never
How
heard.
did you know that Jesse Franklin is going to come here in
So
1776?
she did the whole draft of the job description, and she's never mentioned herself at all.
I mean, it's like, thank goodness we've
And I
renamed
think she
this.
must, I mean, she would know when we were in, if she
He gives his speech in 1776.
she would know. She's very, very.
He gives it at the time the troops are here. Yeah.
Oh, that's
I would think,
1776.
yeah, that she would say, and when we're
Thank God
done.
they named us Franklin.
Yeah, thank God they renamed the town.
There'll probably be some people coming forward.
Yeah.
I don't know. Where Tracy at?
You would know better than us.
Because
See, this is when we were doing the
But the
story.
east part is, so
she's too old.
there is this traveling troupe
Yeah.
of just, so Franklin and
In my
Meriwether
house.
and Jackson are all in George Colbert's
She
house,
doesn't want to go full-time.
which is at the top of the Natchez Trace.
She's
It's
very.
part of the creek section.
I loved working.
But then they're like a movable feast, and there's like 4 or 5 guys that just keep pulling this off, but that's 1815, 1816. That's
Yeah.
42 years later.
At least, you know,
In the
period, yeah, she's carrying everything on her shoulders. That is a good point. I think that she should definitely.
Reach out to me and I'll send you the
I will,
documents.
I will. Send you those.
I have those readily available.